What was the craziest scandal at your school? I was sitting in the campus coffee shop at Northwestern, scrolling through the latest issue of Prairie Wind Literary Review on my laptop, when I saw it. My own words staring back at me under someone else's name. The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter, by Robert M. Hensley. My heart stopped. That was my story. Every word, every carefully crafted metaphor about loss and memory that I poured onto paper during Mr. Hensley's advanced creative writing class last spring. The story about my grandmother's final summer, the one that had made half my classmates cry when I read it aloud. The one Mr. Hensley had called absolutely stunning work and asked to keep a copy of for his files. I read the byline again, hoping I'd made some impossible mistake. But there it was, Robert M. Hensley, the same man who'd been my English teacher for 2 years, who'd written one of my college recommendation letters, who I trusted completely. My hands shook as I screenshot the page. The publication date was 3 months ago, August 2023. I'd written that story in April. My stomach churned as I realized what this meant. Mr. Hensley hadn't just borrowed my work for inspiration. He'd stolen it, submitted it as his own, and gotten paid for it. I immediately started searching his name in other literary magazines. Blue Mountain Review. Crossroads Quarterly. The Midwest Voice. Story after story appeared, all attributed to Robert M. Hensley, all sounding eerily familiar. Summer Rain, that was definitely Jake Morrison's piece from sophomore year about his parents' divorce. Letters to Mars, Sarah Chen's science fiction story that everyone had loved. The Last Dance, Madison Torres's heartbreaking piece about her grandfather's dementia. My coffee grew cold as I kept searching, kept finding. Magazine after magazine. Story after story. Some dating back 3 years. He'd been doing this systematically, methodically, stealing from students who trusted him, who looked up to him, who had no idea their work was being published under his name. The worst part. Next to several stories were little author bios. Robert M. Hensley teaches high school English in suburban Chicago and has been published in over 30 literary magazines. He was recently nominated for the Illinois Education Association's Distinguished Educator Award. That award ceremony was in 2 weeks. I'd seen the flyers around school. Mr. Hensley was supposed to receive some big honor for his dedication to fostering young writers and his own contributions to literature. I felt sick. This was the man who'd encouraged me to apply to Northwestern's journalism program, who'd stayed after school to help me with my college essays, who'd made me believe I could actually be a writer someday. And he'd been stealing from me and my classmates all along. I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this information? Who would believe me? And even if they did, what would happen to my college applications? My letters of recommendation. Mr. Hensley still had power over my future, and I was just a 17-year-old senior with 6 months left until graduation. But as I thought about Jake and Sarah and Madison, about all the students who didn't even know their work was out there making him money and building his reputation, I knew I couldn't just sit on this. I had to do something. The next morning at school, I couldn't focus on anything. During first period calculus, I kept staring at the back of Jake Morrison's head, wondering if I should tell him about Summer Rain. In AP History, I found myself studying Sarah Chen's profile as she took notes, debating whether she deserved to know that her Mars story had earned Mr. Hensley a $50 payment from Crossroads Quarterly. By lunch, I'd made a decision. I had to talk to someone, and Jake seemed like the safest choice. We'd been friends since middle school, and his story was one of the most recent thefts I'd found. Jake, can I show you something weird? I said, sliding into the seat across from him in the cafeteria. Sure, what's up? He looked up from his turkey sandwich, curious. I pulled out my phone and navigated to the Blue Mountain Review website. Remember that story you wrote about your parents' divorce? Summer Rain. His face shifted slightly. Yeah, from Mr. Hensley's class sophomore year. Why? I turned my phone toward him. Look at this. Jake's eyes widened as he read. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. What the hell? That's my story. Word for word. But it says. He looked up at me, confused and angry. It says Robert Hensley wrote it. I know. I found my grandmother's story published under his name too. And Sarah's Mars piece. And Madison's dance story. Jake, I think he's been stealing from all of us. For how long? Jake's voice was tight. At least 3 years, from what I can tell. Maybe longer. I showed him my screenshots from the night before. Look at this, he's been published in 37 different magazines. I've identified at least 12 stories that I know came from our class, and there are probably more from students I don't remember or classes I wasn't in. Jake stared at the evidence, his hands clenched into fists. This is insane. He's making money off our work. And getting awards for it. The Illinois Education Association thing, I said. 2 weeks from now. They're giving him a Distinguished Educator Award partly because of his published works. We have to tell someone. Who? And what happens when we do? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Think about it, Jake. He wrote recommendation letters for both of us. He knows everyone in the English department. Principal Martinez loves him. If we accuse him without absolutely bulletproof evidence. Jake's face fell as he understood. He could destroy our college chances. Exactly. And it's not just us. He's got power over every student in his classes right now. If he wanted to retaliate. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between us. Around us, the cafeteria buzzed with normal teenage conversations about weekend plans and upcoming tests. It felt surreal to be discussing something so serious while sophomores argued about basketball tryouts at the next table. So what do we do? Jake finally asked. I've been thinking about this all morning. We need more evidence. And we need to be smart about how we use it. If we're going to take him down, we need to make sure he can't wiggle out of it or turn it around on us. Take him down how? I thought about that award ceremony, about Mr. Hensley standing up in front of the whole district to accept recognition for stolen work. About all the students who didn't even know they'd been robbed. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But it has to be public. And it has to be undeniable. That afternoon, Jake and I met in the school library to dig deeper. We commandeered a corner computer and started systematically searching every literary magazine we could find online. What we discovered made my stomach drop even further. "Holy shit," Jake whispered, then glanced around to make sure the librarian hadn't heard him. "Look at this payment information." He'd found a contributors page for Midwest Voices that listed their payment rates: $50 for flash fiction, $150 for longer pieces, plus contributor copies. I did quick math in my head based on what we'd found so far. If he's been getting paid for even half of these. I started. "That's at least $3,000, Jake finished. Maybe more. He's literally profiting off student work." I screenshotted everything while Jake kept searching. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. "Jake. Look at this." I pointed to a story in River Valley Quarterly called Finding Home. The byline read Robert M. Hensley, but I recognized the premise immediately. "That's Emma Rodriguez's story. From this semester." Jake frowned. "Emma's in my AP Lit class with him right now. She just turned that in 2 weeks ago. And it was published online yesterday." I felt sick. He's not even waiting anymore. He's stealing current work from current students. We spent another hour documenting everything we could find. By the time we left the library, we had screenshots of 23 stolen stories spanning 4 years, payment information from multiple magazines, and a growing list of victims who had no idea what had happened to their work. But as we walked toward the parking lot, I spotted Mr. Hensley's silver Honda in the teacher's section, and panic shot through me. What if he somehow found out what we were doing? What if the librarian mentioned seeing us researching literary magazines? "We need to be more careful," I told Jake. "And we need help." The next day during lunch, we approached Sarah Chen and Madison Torres. I'd been nervous about expanding our circle, but we needed to know if other students had suspected anything. "You're kidding me," Madison said after we showed her The Last Dance, published under Mr. Hensley's name in Prairie Winds. Her voice was deadly quiet. "My grandfather's story. The one I wrote about his Alzheimer's. The one that made me cry reading it in class." Sarah was staring at her phone screen showing Letters to Mars. "This was personal," she said. "This story was about my little brother. About how I tell him bedtime stories and pretend I'm sending messages to Mars where our dad is stationed." She looked up at us, eyes bright with anger. "He stole something I wrote about my family." "There are more," I said gently. "We found 23 so far, going back years." "But Sarah, we need to ask, have you noticed anything weird in his classes? Any comments about your writing, or requests to keep copies?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Actually, yeah. Last month he asked me to email him my portfolio because he wanted to share my growth as a writer with colleagues. I thought it was a compliment." Madison nodded slowly. "He asked for digital copies of all my work too. Said he was putting together examples of exceptional student writing for a conference presentation." "That bastard," Jake muttered. "He's been grooming us. Making us feel special so we'd hand over our work." I felt a chill run down my spine. Which means he probably has digital copies of everything. Easy to submit to magazines. "So what's our plan?" Madison asked. "Because I am not letting this slide. That story about my grandfather, it's probably the most important thing I've ever written." I looked around at their faces, Jake's determined anger, Sarah's quiet fury, Madison's steely resolve. These were people I'd known for years, people whose trust had been violated just like mine. "The awards ceremony," I said. 2 weeks from Friday. He's getting honored in front of the entire district for being an exceptional educator and published author. 500 people, including school board members, parents, and students. "You want to expose him there?" Sarah asked. "I want to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of exceptional educator he really is. But first, we needed more evidence, and we needed to be absolutely certain we could protect ourselves from retaliation." That weekend, I convinced my parents I was working on a research project and spent both days at the public library, using their computers to avoid leaving any digital trail at school. What I found made everything so much worse. Mr. Hensley wasn't just stealing from current students. I discovered stories in literary magazines dating back to 2019, his first year teaching at our school. The Weight of Words, in Chicago Literary Review was definitely from Amanda Peterson, who'd graduated 3 years ago. Midnight Train, from Heartland Voices had Alex Kim's distinctive style all over it, and Alex was now a junior at DePaul, completely unaware his high school story was earning his former teacher recognition. But the discovery that made my hands shake was finding Mr. Hensley's submission guidelines for something called the Prairie State's Teaching Excellence Portfolio. He'd submitted a collection of what he called his mentored student works, alongside his own original publications, as evidence of his teaching impact. The same stolen stories were being used twice, once to build his reputation as a published author, and again to demonstrate his effectiveness as an educator. The monetary trail was even more disgusting than we'd initially calculated. I found payment records he'd foolishly posted on a teaching blog where he discussed supplementing educator income through literary pursuits. Over 4 years, he'd made at least $4,200 from stolen student work. That wasn't counting the value of the awards, the professional recognition, or the credibility that helped him secure his tenured position last year. Monday morning, I gathered our group in an empty classroom during lunch. Madison had recruited Emma Rodriguez, whose story we'd found published just days after she'd submitted it. Emma was furious in a way that actually scared me a little. "He looked me in the eye last week and said my writing showed real promise," Emma said, her voice shaking. "He told me I should consider submitting to magazines, that I had what it takes to be published. And the whole time, he'd already stolen my work and gotten it published under his name." "There's something else," I said, spreading out printouts across the desk. I found his teaching portfolio submission. "He's not just stealing our stories to make money, he's using them as evidence that he's a great teacher. The school board gave him tenure partly because of this." Sarah studied the documents. "So he's built his entire career on student work. And he's about to be honored for it in front of the whole district," Jake added. Emma looked up from the papers. "My parents are coming to that ceremony. They're so proud that I'm in his award-winning teacher's class." They have no idea he stole my story 2 weeks ago. That's when Madison said something that changed everything. My aunt works for the Chicago Tribune education desk. She's covering the award ceremony. We all stared at her. What do you mean, covering it? I asked. It's a big deal, apparently. The Illinois Education Association only gives out 5 Distinguished Educator Awards each year. My aunt said they're doing a feature story on all the winners, including interviews and photos. She specifically mentioned Mr. Hensley because his combination of teaching excellence and personal literary success was so impressive to the selection committee. The irony was almost too perfect. A Chicago Tribune reporter would be there to celebrate Mr. Hensley's achievements, having no idea she was actually documenting the biggest academic fraud in our district's history. Madison, I said slowly, does your aunt know you're in Mr. Hensley's class? Yeah, she's the one who told my parents about the ceremony. She said she might want to interview some of his students about what makes him such an inspirational teacher. Emma leaned forward. What if we made sure she got a very different kind of story? I felt my pulse quicken. This was bigger than just confronting Mr. Hensley at a school ceremony. This was about making sure the truth reached the people who could actually hold him accountable. We'd have to be absolutely perfect, I said. One mistake, and he destroys all of us. The next few days were a blur of careful planning and growing paranoia. Every time Mr. Hensley smiled at me in the hallway or complimented someone's work in class, I felt like he could somehow read our intentions. During Wednesday's creative writing class, he handed back our latest assignments with his usual encouraging comments, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from asking if he'd already submitted mine to Literary Horizons Quarterly. Remember, your portfolios are due Friday, he announced as class ended. I'm looking forward to seeing how much you've all grown as writers this semester. I'll bet you are, I thought, watching him collect the stories from students who had no idea they were potentially handing over their intellectual property. That afternoon, Madison texted our group chat, *aunt wants to interview exceptional students Thursday after school. Told her we'd love to talk about Mr. H's teaching methods, *. My stomach flipped. We were really doing this. Thursday evening, I sat in Madison's living room across from her Aunt Carol, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a digital recorder between us and a notebook full of questions about inspirational teaching. Sarah, Jake, Madison, and Emma flanked me on the couch, all of us trying to look like eager students ready to praise our beloved teacher. So tell me, Carol said, what makes Mr. Hensley such an exceptional educator? The selection committee was particularly impressed by his ability to nurture young writers while maintaining his own successful publishing career. I exchanged glances with Jake. This was it. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, we've been doing some research on Mr. Hensley's publishing career. We found some really interesting connections. Carol's eyebrows raised slightly. Oh. What kind of connections? I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. We've discovered that Mr. Hensley has been systematically plagiarizing student work and publishing it under his own name for at least 4 years. The recorder kept spinning, but Carol's expression shifted from polite interest to sharp attention. That's a very serious accusation. What evidence do you have? For the next hour, we walked her through everything. The side-by-side comparisons of student work and published stories. The timeline showing stories appearing in magazines within weeks of being submitted for class. The payment records and his own documentation of supplemental income from literary publications. Emma's story that had been published just 5 days after she turned it in. Carol asked pointed questions, took notes, and requested copies of everything. She was particularly interested in the teaching portfolio he'd submitted to earn tenure. The financial aspect adds another dimension, she said, studying the payment calculations. This isn't just academic dishonesty, it's fraud. He's profited from stolen work and used it to advance his career. There's more, Sarah said quietly. I contacted Alex Kim, he graduated 3 years ago. His story, Midnight Train, is published under Mr. Hensley's name in Heartland Voices. Alex had no idea. He's driving down from DePaul tomorrow night for the ceremony. And Amanda Peterson, Madison added. She's a senior at University of Iowa now. When I told her about The Weight of Words being published under his name, she started crying. She said that story was about her brother's deployment to Afghanistan, and she'd always regretted not submitting it anywhere herself. Carol looked up from her notes. How many former students are we talking about? We've identified work from at least 15 different students, I said. But there are probably more. He's taught hundreds of kids over 4 years. And tomorrow night, he's receiving an award that's partly based on these stolen works, Emma said. In front of 500 people who think he's this amazing teacher and accomplished author. Carol closed her notebook and leaned back. I need to make some calls. This story just became much bigger than a feel-good piece about an award-winning teacher. After she left, we sat in Madison's living room, the weight of what we'd just said in motion settling over us. There's no going back now, Jake said. Good, Emma replied fiercely. He destroyed our trust. He stole our words, our stories, our personal experiences. He deserves whatever happens. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to detonate a bomb whose blast radius we couldn't fully predict. Friday morning arrived with an email that made my blood freeze. Subject, Portfolio Conference, Required Meeting. Dear students. Due to some scheduling changes, I need to meet individually with each student about your portfolio submissions before tonight's ceremony. Please see me during your assigned time slot. This is mandatory and will affect your semester grade, *. Best regards. Mr. Hensley. My meeting was scheduled for 3:15 p.m., just 4 hours before the award ceremony. The timing felt deliberately calculated, like he was planning something. I immediately called an emergency group meeting in the journalism room during lunch. Everyone looked as rattled as I felt. He knows, Sarah said, pacing behind the computers. Somehow he figured out what we're doing. How could he know? Madison asked. We were careful. We didn't use school computers, we didn't. Wait. Jake's face had gone pale. Yesterday in AP Lit, he made this weird comment. We were discussing research methods, and he said something about how digital footprints always reveal the truth, and looked right at me when he said it. Emma pulled out her phone. I just got another email from him. He wants to discuss my recent writing development and how my work shows striking similarities to published pieces. That's not a coincidence. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop. Maybe he found out about Carol's investigation. Maybe someone tipped him off, or maybe he's been monitoring us somehow, Madison interrupted. Think about it. He's tech-savvy enough to submit to all these online magazines. What if he's been tracking school computer usage? Or monitoring our school email accounts? The possibility made me sick. Had we been naive to think we could investigate him without him noticing? I'm not going to that meeting, Emma declared. Whatever he's planning, I'm not walking into it alone. None of us are, I said. But we can't just skip it. That'll confirm his suspicions, and he'll know we have something to hide. Sarah stopped pacing. What if we record the meetings? If he tries to threaten us or admits to anything? One-party consent state, Jake said immediately. We can legally record him as long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded. I felt a spark of hope. If he tries to intimidate us, we'll have evidence. And if he doesn't know what we're doing yet, maybe we can get him to incriminate himself. By 3 p.m., my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had my phone recording in my jacket pocket as I knocked on Mr. Hensley's classroom door. Come in, sit down, he said, his usual warm smile noticeably absent. His desk was covered with printed pages, my portfolio submissions, but also other documents I couldn't quite see. I've been reviewing your work this semester, he began, and I noticed something interesting. Your writing style has become remarkably sophisticated. Almost professional quality. I kept my voice steady. Thank you. I've been working really hard to improve. Have you? He leaned forward, studying my face. Because I've also been doing some research myself. Into literary magazines, publication records, that sort of thing. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. My mouth went dry. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. He turned his computer screen toward me. It showed a browser history, searches for his name, literary magazines, payment records. The school's IT department is very helpful when a teacher expresses concerns about students potentially accessing inappropriate content during school hours. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. We'd been so careful to use the public library, but clearly not careful enough. Someone must have searched something at school, maybe during those first frantic moments in the library when we discovered his thefts. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Hensley continued, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, cold, calculated, completely unlike the encouraging teacher I'd known. You're going to stand up tonight when I receive my award, and you're going to applaud with everyone else. You're going to smile when that reporter takes pictures. And you're going to keep whatever misguided theories you've developed to yourself. And if I don't? His smile was thin and humorless. Your Northwestern acceptance is contingent on maintaining your grades and character standards. I'd hate for them to receive a call about your recent behavioral concerns, the plagiarism accusations you've been spreading, the conspiracy theories you've been involving other students in, the harassment campaign you've been organizing against a respected faculty member. The recording device felt hot against my ribs. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? He gestured to the printed browser history. I have documentation of your obsessive research into my personal life. I have witness statements from concerned faculty members about your recent erratic behavior. And I have 4 years of exemplary service to this district versus the word of a troubled student who's clearly struggling with the stress of senior year. I realized with growing horror how easily he could flip this entire narrative. Who would believe a 17-year-old over a beloved, award-winning teacher? The same goes for your little friends, he continued. Jake's counting on his University of Michigan scholarship. Sarah's got early admission to Stanford. Madison's hoping for that internship at the Chicago Sun-Times. Yes, I know about that too. It would be tragic if any of them faced setbacks because they got mixed up in your conspiracy theories. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Enjoy the ceremony tonight. I know I will. I left his classroom on shaking legs, my mind reeling. He hadn't just discovered our investigation, he turned it into a weapon against us. And in 6 hours, he'd be standing on stage accepting an award for excellence in education, built on 4 years of stolen student work. But as I walked to the parking lot, I realized something important. He'd been so focused on threatening us that he'd never actually denied stealing the stories. In fact, his confident threats suggested he believed he was untouchable. That gave me an idea. A dangerous, terrifying, potentially catastrophic idea. But first, I needed to warn the others. The emergency group meeting in Jake's basement felt like a war council. Everyone looked shaken after their individual portfolio conferences with Mr. Hensley. Emma was practically vibrating with rage, Sarah kept checking her phone nervously, and Madison had gone completely quiet, which was somehow more terrifying than if she'd been yelling. He threatened my Stanford admission, Sarah said, her voice hollow. Told me he'd call their admissions office personally if I didn't reconsider my recent poor judgment. Michigan scholarship for me, Jake added grimly. Said one phone call about character concerns would end everything. Emma slammed her hand on Jake's desk. This is insane. He's the criminal here, and somehow he's got us backed into a corner. How is that even possible? Because the system protects people like him, I said, pulling out my phone. But I recorded everything. Listen to this. I played back the most damning parts of my meeting, his casual threats, his detailed knowledge of our college plans, his smug confidence that no one would believe us over him. When his voice saying, it would be tragic if any of them faced setbacks, filled the basement, Madison finally spoke. He just made a huge mistake. We all looked at her. She was staring at her phone, but there was something different in her expression, not fear anymore, but cold determination. I texted my aunt after my meeting, she said. Told her Hensley had gotten suspicious and was making threats. She said something I didn't understand at first, but now. She held up her phone. She's been busy today. Really busy. What do you mean? Madison's smile was sharp. Aunt Carol didn't just write for the education desk. She spent 5 years on investigative reporting before switching beats. When we gave her our evidence yesterday, she didn't just take notes, she started making calls. To the magazines. To the literary organizations. To Alex Kim and Amanda Peterson and 8 other former students she tracked down. My heart started racing. And she spent today building an airtight case. She's got signed statements from 12 former students confirming their work was stolen. She's got magazine editors admitting they never suspected the submissions weren't original because they came from a respected educator. She's got financial records showing exactly how much money he's made. Jake leaned forward. So what happens now? Now she's not just covering the award ceremony as a puff piece, Madison said. She's covering it as the scene of the crime. She'll be there tonight with a photographer and a recording device, waiting to see if Mr. Distinguished Educator has anything to say about defrauding 37 literary magazines and stealing intellectual property from minors. Emma's eyes widened. She's going to confront him. Tonight? In front of everyone. Better than that, Madison replied. She's going to let him accept his award first. Let him give his speech about inspiring young writers and fostering creativity. Let him pose for pictures with a plaque recognizing his outstanding contributions to literature and education. And then? Sarah asked. Madison's smile grew wider. And then she's going to ask him about the lighthouse keeper's daughter and whether he'd like to comment on accusations that he's built his entire career on student plagiarism. The basement went dead quiet as we absorbed this. Mr. Hensley thought he'd cornered us, thought his threats had neutered our investigation. He had no idea that while he was busy intimidating teenagers, a professional investigative reporter had been systematically dismantling his entire fraud operation. There's more, Madison continued. Carol contacted the Illinois Education Association this afternoon. They're sending a representative to tonight's ceremony, not to celebrate, but to investigate. If even half of what we've documented is true, they'll revoke his award and launch a formal inquiry. What about our college applications? Jake asked, voicing what we were all thinking. He can still make those calls. From what prison? Emma shot back. Because copyright infringement is a federal crime, and Carol thinks the dollar amounts push this into felony territory. I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, hope. Real, concrete hope that justice might actually be possible. So we just go tonight and watch it happen? I asked. Madison nodded. We sit in the audience like normal students supporting our teacher. We smile and applaud when he gets his award. We watch him give his speech about how much he loves nurturing young talent. And then we watch his entire world collapse, Sarah finished softly. For the first time in days, I actually smiled. The Westfield High School auditorium was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. Parents filled the main floor while students crowded into the balcony section, everyone dressed in their nicest clothes for what the program called an evening celebrating academic excellence. I sat in the third row with Jake, Sarah, Madison, and Emma, all of us trying to look like proud students instead of co-conspirators waiting for a bomb to detonate. Mr. Hensley sat on stage with the 4 other Distinguished Educator Award recipients, looking completely relaxed in his navy suit and silver tie. He caught my eye at one point and gave me that same thin smile from our meeting, clearly convinced he'd successfully intimidated us into silence. If only he knew that Madison's Aunt Carol was sitting in the press section just 20 feet away, a leather portfolio full of evidence balanced on her lap. Welcome, everyone, to our annual celebration of the educators who make our district extraordinary, announced Dr. Patricia Williams, the state superintendent. Tonight we recognize 5 individuals whose dedication, innovation, and personal achievements exemplify the very best in teaching. The ceremony crawled by with speeches about transformative education and inspiring our next generation. Each award recipient got 5 minutes on stage, a brief bio, their accomplishments, and a chance to address the audience. Mr. Hensley was scheduled fourth, right after Mrs. Rodriguez from Lincoln Elementary received recognition for her bilingual literacy program. My palms were sweating so badly I had to wipe them on my dress every few minutes. Emma kept bouncing her leg nervously, while Jake stared at the stage with an intensity that was probably visible from space. Only Madison seemed calm, occasionally glancing toward where her aunt sat with her notebook ready. Our 4th honoree, Dr. Williams announced, has distinguished himself not only as an exceptional educator but as a published author whose work has appeared in dozens of literary magazines across the Midwest. Please welcome Robert Hensley from Westfield High School. The applause was thunderous. Parents beamed, students cheered, and fellow teachers gave him a standing ovation. Mr. Hensley walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who believed he'd earned every bit of recognition. Thank you so much, he began, his voice carrying that same warm tone that had made me trust him completely just months ago. Teaching is more than a profession, it's a calling. And working with young writers, watching their creativity flourish, seeing their raw talent develop into something truly special, there's no greater privilege. My stomach twisted as he continued talking about nurturing the next generation of storytellers and the sacred trust between educator and student. Every word felt like a betrayal, knowing he'd built his reputation on violating that exact trust. I've been blessed to see my students' growth reflected in my own work, he said, gesturing toward the plaque in his hands. Their passion inspires my writing, their stories fuel my creativity. In many ways, everything I've published has been influenced by the remarkable young people I'm honored to teach. The irony was so blatant I wondered if he was taunting us. Sarah's hand found mine and squeezed tight as he wrapped up his speech to another round of applause. But as Mr. Hensley returned to his seat, I noticed something that made my heart race. Carol was standing up, moving toward the side of the auditorium where she'd have a clear path to the stage. She'd waded through his entire self-congratulatory speech, letting him dig his hole deeper with every word about inspiration and sacred trust. The final award was being presented to a high school principal from Springfield, but I could barely focus. This was it. In just a few minutes, Carol would approach that microphone and ask a question that would destroy everything Mr. Hensley had built on stolen student work. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison, *aunt says school board chair looks nervous. Someone tipped them off, *. I felt a chill run down my spine. If the school board already knew something was coming, this was about to get much bigger than just a newspaper confrontation. The Springfield principal finished her acceptance speech and returned to her seat. Dr. Williams stepped back to the podium for closing remarks, but before she could speak, Carol was already walking down the center aisle toward the stage, her press badge clearly visible and a photographer following behind her. Excuse me, Carol called out, her voice carrying easily through the suddenly quiet auditorium. Carol Martinez from the Chicago Tribune. I have a few questions for Mr. Hensley about his published works. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dr. Williams looked confused, then alarmed. Ma'am, this isn't the appropriate time for. Actually, it's the perfect time, Carol interrupted, reaching the front of the auditorium. Mr. Hensley just gave a beautiful speech about nurturing young writers and the sacred trust between educators and students. I'd love to hear him explain how that philosophy aligns with stealing his students' work and publishing it under his own name. The auditorium erupted. Parents started murmuring, students craned their necks to see better, and I watched Mr. Hensley's face drain of all color. He gripped his award plaque so tightly his knuckles went white. That's a serious accusation, Dr. Williams said, but her voice lacked conviction. She kept glancing toward the school board section, where several officials were frantically whispering to each other. It is indeed, Carol agreed, opening her leather portfolio. Which is why I've spent the last 18 hours gathering evidence. Mr. Hensley, would you like to comment on why your story The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter, published in Prairie Wind Literary Review last August, is identical to a piece written by your student in April of this year? Mr. Hensley stood up slowly, his practiced composure finally cracking. I don't know what you're talking about. This is clearly some kind of misunderstanding. What about Summer Rain in Blue Mountain Review? Or Letters to Mars in Crossroads Quarterly? Or the 12 other stories I've documented that were submitted to literary magazines within weeks of being turned in by your students? Carol's voice cut through his stammering like a blade. I have signed statements from 15 former and current students confirming you stole their work. The photographer was capturing everything, Mr. Hensley's panic, the school board's horror, the audience's shocked faces. This was turning into exactly the public reckoning we'd hoped for, but seeing it happen felt surreal and terrifying. Furthermore, Carol continued, pulling out a thick folder, financial records show you've earned approximately $4,200 from these stolen works over the past 4 years. That constitutes fraud, copyright infringement, and exploitation of minors. Dr. Williams stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control. This is highly inappropriate. If there are allegations, they should go through proper channels. They already have, interrupted a new voice from the back of the auditorium. A woman in a dark suit was walking briskly down the aisle, followed by two men in similar attire. Illinois Education Association Investigative Committee. We received a formal complaint this afternoon and have been reviewing the evidence. Mr. Hensley sat down heavily, his face now completely gray. Around us, parents were pulling out phones, recording everything. The principal from Springfield looked like she wanted to disappear, while the other award recipients sat frozen in their chairs. Robert Hensley, the IEA investigator announced, her voice echoing through the silent auditorium, pending the outcome of our investigation, your teaching certification is hereby suspended, and this award is revoked effective immediately. She walked up the stage steps and, without ceremony, took the plaque from his nerveless fingers. The symbolic gesture felt like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. That's when Emma stood up in our row, her voice clear and strong. He threatened our college applications yesterday when he found out we were investigating him. He said he'd destroy our futures if we didn't stay quiet. And suddenly, we weren't just witnesses anymore, we were part of the story, part of the justice finally being served. Other students started standing up throughout the auditorium. First it was Marcus Chin from my sophomore English class, then Jessica Williams from Advanced Composition. One by one, voices began cutting through the chaos. He asked me to email him my entire portfolio last month, called out David Park, a junior I barely knew. Said he wanted to use it as an example for other teachers. He told me my story about my dad's cancer was publication quality, added Rebecca Santos, her voice shaking with anger. He asked for a digital copy to share with colleagues. I watched Mr. Hensley's face as more students spoke up, each one revealing another piece of his systematic grooming process. The confident predator who threatened us just hours earlier was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he might vomit right there on stage. Carol was frantically taking notes while her photographer captured everything. This was no longer just about the evidence we gathered, it was turning into a live testimonial from dozens of potential victims. But then Principal Martinez finally found his voice. That's enough, he shouted, moving toward the center aisle. This is completely inappropriate. We need to clear the auditorium immediately and handle this through proper administrative channels. The IEA investigator held up her hand. Actually, these testimonials are valuable evidence. I'd like to speak with any student who believes their work may have been compromised. Absolutely not, Martinez shot back, his face red with what looked like panic. These are minors making serious accusations without parental consent or legal representation. This circus ends now. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. While everyone was focused on the drama unfolding in the aisles, Mr. Hensley was quietly making his way toward the stage exit, using the chaos as cover to escape. Without thinking, I stood up and pointed. He's leaving. Mr. Hensley's trying to leave. Every head in the auditorium turned toward the stage, where our former teacher was indeed slipping toward the side exit, his award plaque abandoned on his chair. The photographer swung around, capturing the moment of his attempted flight. Robert Hensley, please remain in the auditorium, the IEA investigator called out firmly. We have questions that need immediate answers. He froze at the exit door, his hand on the handle. For a moment, I thought he might bolt anyway, just run into the parking lot and drive away from the wreckage of his career. But slowly, he turned back to face the 500 people staring at him in horrified silence. This is all a misunderstanding, he said, his voice barely audible without the microphone. These students, they're confused. They don't understand how literary inspiration works. Literary inspiration. Emma's voice cut through the air like glass. Is that what you call stealing my story about my dead grandmother and putting your name on it? The photographer captured that moment too, Emma standing in the audience, pointing an accusing finger at the man who betrayed her trust, while parents and school officials watched in stunned silence. Carol stepped forward again, her reporter's instincts taking over. Mr. Hensley, you mentioned inspiration. Can you explain how The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter was inspired by your student's work if it contains identical passages, including the specific metaphor about grief settling like salt on weathered wood, a phrase that appears nowhere else in literature? The silence stretched so long I could hear the auditorium's air conditioning humming. Mr. Hensley opened his mouth, closed it, then looked desperately toward Principal Martinez as if expecting rescue. Instead, Martinez stepped back, literally distancing himself from the man he'd supported for tenure just last year. That's when I realized we'd won. Not just the investigation, not just the exposure, we'd won something bigger. The truth was finally stronger than his threats. The next few minutes felt like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Mr. Hensley remained frozen by the exit, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly while Carol continued her methodical destruction of his defenses. I have copies of the original student submissions here, she announced, pulling out a thick manila folder. Complete with timestamps, email headers, and class assignment sheets. Would you like to explain how your story was published in Prairie Wind 3 months before you claim to have written it? That's impossible, he stammered, finally finding his voice. The timeline is wrong. You're confused about the dates. Emma laughed bitterly from our row. I have the Google Doc history, Mr. Hensley. It shows exactly when I created the document, every revision I made, even the comment you left saying it was emotionally powerful work that I should be proud of. That's when Principal Martinez made what I realized later was a catastrophic mistake. Instead of letting the investigators handle the situation, he stepped forward with the kind of damage control energy that screamed guilty knowledge. Everyone needs to calm down, he announced, his voice tight. Mr. Hensley is a valued faculty member with 4 years of exemplary service. These accusations are serious and require thorough investigation through proper channels, not a public lynching. The choice of words, valued faculty member, hit the auditorium like a physical blow. Parents started murmuring angrily, and I heard someone near the back shout, valued? He's a thief. But it was Carol's next question that made my stomach drop. Mr. Martinez, were you aware that the school district's application for the State Excellence in Arts Education grant specifically cited Mr. Hensley's published works as evidence of your English department's quality? The color drained from Martinez's face. That's not relevant to. It's extremely relevant, the IEA investigator interrupted, pulling out her own folder. Because that grant application resulted in $47,000 in state funding based partly on fraudulent claims about faculty achievements. This isn't just about one teacher's misconduct anymore. Jake grabbed my arm. Holy shit, he whispered. The whole district is involved. I watched Martinez's panicked expression and realized Jake was right. This wasn't just Mr. Hensley stealing stories for personal gain, it was institutional fraud involving state money. The scope of this scandal was expanding by the minute. Dr. Williams, the state's superintendent, stepped back to the microphone with the kind of calm that suggested years of crisis management experience. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to conclude this evening's ceremony immediately. All award recipients except Mr. Hensley will be contacted about rescheduling their recognition. Parents and students, please exit in an orderly fashion. But before anyone could move, a new voice cut through the auditorium. I don't think so. Alex Kim was standing in the back, still wearing his DePaul University sweatshirt from the 3-hour drive down from Chicago. Behind him stood Amanda Peterson, looking older and more serious than I remembered from her graduation photos. I'm Alex Kim, class of 2021, he announced, his voice carrying clearly. Mr. Hensley stole my story, Midnight Train, and published it in Heartland Voices magazine in March 2022. I found out about it yesterday, and I drove here tonight because I wanted to look him in the eye when I told him he's a fraud. Amanda stepped forward beside him. Amanda Peterson, class of 2020. The Weight of Words in Chicago Literary Review was my story about my brother's deployment. That story was about the last conversation we had before he left for Afghanistan. It was personal. It was mine. And he stole it. The photographer was capturing everything, but more importantly, I could see other adults in the audience pulling out phones to record. This wasn't just going to be a Tribune story anymore, this was going viral in real time. That's when Mr. Hensley finally broke. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said, his voice cracking as he walked back toward the center of the stage. I never meant, they were just exercises. Class assignments. I thought if I polished them, made them better. The auditorium went dead silent. After hours of denials and deflection, he was actually confessing. Carol's pen was flying across her notepad. Are you admitting to taking student work without permission? I made them better, he repeated, louder now, as if volume could justify theft. Half of these kids don't even know what they've written. They turn in these raw, unfinished pieces and forget about them. I saw the potential. I refined them. I gave them the audience they deserved. Emma stood up so fast her chair squeaked. You gave them the audience they deserved? Under your name? With your bank account getting the payment? The auditorium erupted into chaos at Emma's words. Parents were shouting, students were on their feet, and I could hear someone near the back yelling, criminal, over and over. But through it all, Mr. Hensley kept talking, his confession spilling out like water through a broken dam. You don't understand the publishing world, he said, his voice taking on a desperate, almost manic quality. These magazines get hundreds of submissions. They want polished work, professional work. I took raw student writing and made it publication ready. I earned those acceptances. With our stories. Marcus Chin shouted from the balcony. Those were our ideas, our experiences. That's when Dr. Williams tried to regain control by approaching the microphone, but Carol intercepted her smoothly. Mr. Hensley, are you saying you believe editing student work gives you the right to claim authorship? I rewrote entire sections, he shot back, gesturing wildly. I restructured narratives, refined dialogue, polished prose. By the time I was done, they were more my stories than theirs. The IEA investigator was writing furiously, but she looked up sharply at his words. Mr. Hensley, did you obtain written permission from these students or their parents before submitting their work for publication? For the first time since his breakdown began, he went quiet. The question hung in the air like smoke, and I could see him finally realizing what he just admitted to in front of 500 witnesses and a recording device. That's not how it works in education, he finally stammered. Teachers use student work for professional development all the time. Professional development, yes, the investigator replied coldly. Personal profit, no. Mr. Hensley, you've just admitted to copyright infringement involving minors. In Illinois, that carries potential criminal penalties. Principal Martinez chose that moment to make another catastrophic intervention. Now wait just a minute, he said, stepping toward the microphone. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. The district has policies for handling these situations, and jumping to criminal charges. Mr. Martinez, Carol interrupted, her reporter instincts clearly sensing blood in the water. How long have you been aware of Mr. Hensley's publishing activities? The question hit him like a physical blow. I watched his face cycle through panic, calculation, and resignation in the span of 3 seconds. The district encourages faculty professional development, including publishing, he said carefully. But we had no knowledge of any impropriety. Really? Alex Kim called out from the back. Because when I was a senior, you specifically mentioned Mr. Hensley's impressive publication record during the Academic Honors Assembly. You said his success brought recognition to our English department. Madison leaned over and whispered, my aunt's been busy. Look at the balcony. I followed her gaze and felt my heart skip. The balcony section was packed not just with students, but with adults I didn't recognize, people with notebooks and cameras who definitely weren't parents. Carol hadn't come alone tonight. She'd brought backup. Furthermore, Alex continued, his voice growing stronger, my story, Midnight Train, won the district's creative writing contest my senior year. There was a ceremony. Awards. My parents have photos of Mr. Hensley presenting me with a plaque for exceptional creative writing. He literally gave me an award for the same story he'd already stolen and published under his name. The auditorium fell silent as the full scope of his audacity sank in. He hadn't just stolen student work, he'd celebrated the students for creating the very pieces he was profiting from. Amanda Peterson stepped forward, her voice shaking with rage. How many of us are there, Mr. Hensley? How many students got awards for work you'd already claimed as your own? But instead of answering, Mr. Hensley looked directly at our row, his eyes finding mine with laser focus. Even in his public meltdown, even with his career collapsing in real time, he still had one card left to play. Ask them about harassment, he said, pointing straight at me. Ask them about the coordinated campaign they've been running. These students have been stalking me online, spreading rumors, trying to destroy my reputation because they're jealous of my success. My blood went ice cold. Even now, even caught red-handed, he was still trying to flip the narrative and make us the villains. But Carol was ready for him. She'd been a reporter too long to fall for desperate deflection tactics. Mr. Hensley, she said, her voice cutting through his accusation like steel, are you referring to the students who discovered that their own creative writing assignments had been published under your name without permission? The same students you met with individually yesterday afternoon. She pulled out her phone and held it up. Because I have recordings of those meetings. Recordings where you threatened their college applications and scholarships if they didn't stay quiet about your theft. My heart hammered as I realized Madison must have given her aunt the audio files we'd all recorded. Mr. Hensley's face went ashen as his final desperate gambit crumbled. Those recordings are illegal, he stammered. You can't use. Illinois is a one-party consent state, the IEA investigator interrupted. Those recordings are perfectly admissible as evidence of witness intimidation and abuse of authority. Dr. Williams stepped forward, clearly trying to end this catastrophe before it got worse. This has gone far enough. We're clearing the auditorium now. All further discussion will happen through proper legal channels. But before security could move, Emma's voice rang out clear and strong, play them. Every head turned toward her. She was standing on her chair now, visible to the entire auditorium. Play the recordings. Let everyone hear what he said to us. Emma, sit down, Principal Martinez ordered, his voice sharp with panic. This is not appropriate. What's not appropriate, Emma shot back, is a teacher threatening 17-year-old students to cover up his crimes. What's not appropriate is him stealing my story about my grandmother's death and making money off it while I cried in his classroom thinking he actually cared. Carol looked toward Dr. Williams, who gave a barely perceptible nod. The politics of the situation were clear, trying to suppress evidence now would only make the cover-up look worse. This is from yesterday's meeting, Carol announced, connecting her phone to the auditorium's sound system. Content warning, adult authority figure threatening minors. Mr. Hensley's voice filled the space, cold and calculated in a way that made parents gasp. Your Northwestern acceptance is contingent on maintaining your grades and character standards. I'd hate for them to receive a call about your recent behavioral concerns. The recording played for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Parents were staring at Mr. Hensley with expressions of disgust and horror. Several school board members were frantically typing on their phones. There are 4 more recordings just like that one, Carol announced. Each targeting a different student, each containing specific threats designed to protect his fraud scheme. That's when Mrs. Chen, Sarah's mother, stood up in the parents section. You threatened my daughter's Stanford admission to cover up your theft. Her voice carried the kind of maternal fury that could level buildings. You looked a 17-year-old girl in the eye and told her you'd destroy her future. Other parents started standing, voices rising in anger. I could hear Mr. Morrison shouting something about his son's scholarship, and Mrs. Rodriguez demanding to know how many other students had been victimized. But it was Alex Kim who delivered the final blow. Mr. Hensley, there's something else you should know. Midnight Train wasn't just a class assignment. It was about my little brother's suicide. The train in the story, that was how he died. You stole the most painful experience of my life, put your name on it, and got paid $150 for my grief. The auditorium went completely silent. Even the investigators stopped writing. In the crushing quiet, I could hear Mr. Hensley's ragged breathing through the sound system as his microphone was still active. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know it was real. They were all real, Amanda Peterson said, her voice breaking. Every story you stole was real. Our lives, our families, our pain, it was all real to us. The weight of Alex's words settled over the auditorium like a physical presence. I watched Mr. Hensley's face crumple as the full magnitude of what he'd done finally hit him, not just the theft, but the violation of our most personal experiences. That's when Dr. Williams made a decision that changed everything. Clear the auditorium, she ordered, her voice carrying absolute authority. This investigation will continue through proper channels. Security, please escort everyone out immediately. But as the uniformed guards moved toward the aisles, Carol held up her press badge. "Ma'am, this is a public ceremony in a public school. The press has a right to. The press has a right to attend scheduled public events," Dr. Williams cut her off sharply. "This is now an active investigation involving allegations against a minor, and I'm invoking student privacy protections to clear the building." My stomach dropped. She was using our age against us, turning our status as minors into a shield to protect the district from further exposure. I could see the calculation in her eyes: limit the damage, control the narrative, handle this quietly behind closed doors where they could manage the fallout. "Wait," I said, standing up before I could lose my nerve. "I'm 18 as of last month. Emma turns 18 next week. Jake's been 18 since September. We're not all minors anymore." Dr. Williams' expression flickered with annoyance. She'd been counting on using child protection laws to shut down the public testimony, but if some of us were legal adults. "That doesn't matter," Principal Martinez interrupted desperately. "This is still a school function, and we have authority to maintain order and protect our educational environment." Carol smiled grimly. "Actually, Mr. Martinez, this stopped being a school function the moment you allowed a public award ceremony to become the scene of a criminal confession. Everything Mr. Hensley said tonight was recorded by multiple devices and witnessed by hundreds of people. You can't put that genie back in the bottle." She was right, and I could see Dr. Williams knew it. Phones had been recording throughout the auditorium. Parents, students, even some of the other reporters, everyone had captured Mr. Hensley's breakdown and confession. But then Mr. Hensley himself made one final, desperate play. "I want a lawyer," he announced, his voice suddenly stronger. "I'm not saying anything else without legal representation. And I want these recordings suppressed as evidence obtained under duress during a mental health crisis." The IEA investigator looked up sharply. "Mr. Hensley, are you claiming diminished capacity?" "I'm claiming that I've been subjected to harassment and public humiliation that compromised my ability to think clearly," he said, his confidence growing as he found his footing in legal terminology. "Any statements I made tonight were the result of extreme emotional distress caused by a coordinated attack on my reputation." I felt the blood drain from my face. Even now, even caught completely red-handed, he was still trying to make us the villains. Worse, his strategy might actually work. If he could claim mental distress, he might be able to get his confession thrown out. Carol seemed to sense the same thing. "Mr. Hensley," she called out, "are you saying your confession was false? That you didn't actually steal student work and publish it under your name?" The trap was perfect. If he said yes, he was admitting to lying under oath in front of hundreds of witnesses. If he said no, he was confirming his guilt regardless of his mental state. He stood there for 30 seconds, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to find an answer that wouldn't destroy him further. Finally, he turned and walked off the stage without another word, leaving his award plaque abandoned on the chair. "Let him go," Dr. Williams ordered as security moved to follow. "We have bigger problems to deal with." She was right. Because as Mr. Hensley disappeared into the wings, Carol was already on her phone with what sounded like her editor, and the other reporters in the balcony were typing frantically on laptops. This story was about to go national. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind I'll never forget. By Saturday morning, our story was trending on Twitter under hashtag Stolen Stories, and by Sunday, it had made national news. CNN ran a segment called When Teachers Become Thieves, featuring interviews with Alex, Amanda, and Emma via video call. The dominoes fell faster than I could track them. The Illinois Education Association formally revoked Mr. Hensley's teaching certification on Saturday. By Monday, the state's attorney general announced a criminal investigation into copyright infringement and fraud. The district placed Principal Martinez on administrative leave pending review of his knowledge of the scheme, and the $47,000 state grant was frozen pending investigation. But the moment I knew we'd really won came Tuesday morning, when I found an email in my inbox from Northwestern University. "Dear student name. We've become aware of recent events at your high school involving academic fraud by a faculty member. Please be assured that these circumstances will have no impact on your admission status. In fact, your courage in exposing systematic academic misconduct demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and investigative spirit we value in our journalism program, *. We look forward to welcoming you to campus this fall." Similar emails arrived for Jake, Sarah, Madison, and Emma. Not only had his threats failed, but our colleges were impressed by our actions. The literary magazine started responding too. Prairie Wind Literary Review issued a public apology and donated the $150 they paid for my grandmother's story to a scholarship fund for student writers. Blue Mountain Review published a formal retraction, crediting Jake as the true author of Summer Rain. One by one, 37 publications corrected their archives, restored proper attribution, and forwarded their payments to the actual authors. Mr. Hensley tried to fight it, hiring an expensive defense attorney who claimed the whole thing was a witch hunt orchestrated by vindictive students. But Carol's investigation had been too thorough. She documented everything: the timeline of submissions, the digital fingerprints proving student authorship, the payment trail, even his own blog posts about supplementing educator income through literary pursuits. The breaking point came when the FBI got involved. Stealing copyrighted work across state lines for profit turned out to be a federal crime, and when they raided his house, they found external hard drives containing hundreds of student assignments dating back to his first year teaching. He hadn't just stolen from our school, he'd done this at his previous district too. 6 months later, Robert M. Hensley pleaded guilty to 19 federal charges including copyright infringement, mail fraud, and wire fraud. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay $127,000 in restitution to the 43 students whose work he'd stolen over 5 years. The school district settled a class action lawsuit for $2.3 million, distributed among affected students and their families. Principal Martinez was fired, and the district implemented new policies requiring digital timestamps and plagiarism detection for all student work submissions. But the best part came 8 months later, at our graduation ceremony. The new principal, Mrs. Davidson, announced that our class had established something unprecedented, the Westfield Student Writer Protection Fund, ensuring future students would have legal support if their intellectual property was ever threatened. As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I thought about Mr. Hensley sitting in his federal prison cell, finally facing consequences for treating student creativity like his personal ATM. The man who threatened to destroy our futures had lost his own instead. After graduation, Emma approached me with tears in her eyes. "I never thanked you," she said. "For standing up first. For making us all brave enough to fight back." I hugged her tightly, thinking about that terrified 17-year-old who discovered her story stolen in a coffee shop 10 months earlier. That girl had been afraid to speak up, afraid to rock the boat, afraid of an adult's power over her future. She'd had no idea she was about to bring down the biggest academic fraud scandal in Illinois education history.